It all started on a pretty ordinary day. Carlie, just a few blocks away from home, was heading back from a friend's house. It was a route she had taken countless times, but this time she never made it home. Just like that, she vanished into thin air. Fake leads popping up everywhere, a mastermind criminal playing games with the police, and a community left grappling with fear and confusion. Then there is a video, an actual video of the moment Carlie was abducted.
Remember this tape, the sinking feeling you must remember the first time you saw this tape, the now notorious security camera videotape. A young girl, a vibrant girl, being led away from a car wash by a hulking man she clearly did not know. This we all feared. Looking at those pictures could end badly, and it did very badly. Today,
it sent shockwaves through the community when it hit the news, but it still didn't crack the case wide open. This was just the beginning of a saga filled with more twists and turns than a roller coaster. So what exactly happened to her? How did a quick walk from a friend's house spiral into one of the most disturbing cases in Sarasota's history? These questions are just the tip of the iceberg. They open up a Pandora's box of sinister plots, eerie coincidences, and a criminal mind so deceptive it'll make your skin crawl. But to truly understand the gravity of this case, we need to start from the beginning. We need to look at every clue, every misstep, and every breakthrough that led to the shocking revelations. All right, so on January 31st, 2004, Carlie had been hanging out at her friend's place overnight. But the next day wasn't just any Sunday, it was Super Bowl Sunday. And Carlie was all set to get back home to catch the game. She assured her friend's mom she could walk back home and set off around 6 p.m. But here's where every parent's worst nightmare kicks in. After Carlie left, the friend's mom got a bad vibe about it all, so she called Carlie's mom, Susan, to let her know Carlie was walking back by herself. Now Susan, feeling that nagging worry only a mom knows, wasn't comfortable with the idea of her daughter walking even a few blocks on her own. So she sent her husband, Carlie's stepdad Steve, out to pick her up and bring her home safely. But as Steve drove up and down the familiar path Carlie should have been on, there was no sign of her, not a trace. Imagine this. Steve's cruising up and down the streets, his eyes scanning every sidewalk and alley, hoping maybe he just missed her or she took a detour. But as the minutes ticked into over an hour, there's still no sign of Carlie. A chilling realization starts to dawn. He rushes back home, half praying she somehow made it back by some other route. But the house is just as he left it, without Carlie. At this point, Susan's mom instincts were in overdrive. She described that moment with heart-wrenching clarity, saying something felt devastatingly wrong. In her heart, in her mind, she just knew something is not right. They couldn't sit still. Susan and Steve jumped back in the car, this time both of them, shouting Carlie's name into the nearby streets. But they didn't even get a sign of her. Nobody knows where did she go. After searching for her on the roads, they even stopped to check out a wooded area nearby. They searched all possible routes which Carlie could have taken back from her friend's house, but no sign at all. Finding no trace of Carlie at the friend's house either, panic fully set in. Susan knew it was time to escalate things. At around 7:30 p.m., with terror gripping her voice, she dialed 911. The fear in her call can be heard, a mother's terror laid bare as the night grew darker and the answers remained just out of reach. Right after Susan's desperate call, the cops were on it. They immediately set up a be on the lookout alert for Carlie and combed through the area for a long 4.5 hours. But it's like she'd vanished into thin air. No signs, no clues, nothing. Meanwhile, Carlie's family and friends weren't just sitting around. They got busy, whipping up missing person flyers with her photo, hoping someone would recognize her and come forward. They hit the streets with those flyers first thing in the morning. Now here's where things get a bit weird. During all this chaos, Carlie's stepdad Steve did something that raised a few eyebrows. He popped into a local equipment rental place to hand out some flyers, right? Normal enough. But then he goes and asks one of the workers if he could score some drugs, in a couple of days after everything blew over. You can imagine how that sounded. Your stepdaughter's missing, and you're out asking for drugs? The guy at the shop thought it was way off too, so he didn't waste any time calling the cops on Steve. Now, with the spotlight turning towards him, the detectives hauled Steve in for a chat. He told them he was at home with Susan the whole time Carlie was missing. Susan backed him up, and after the cops really dug into his story, they confirmed his alibi was solid and he was off the hook. But before they could wrap up, Steve dropped another name, Ron Chiquette. Ron, the guy behind the wheel of a suspicious red tow truck, wasn't just some random dude. He was dating the mother of Carlie's friend, had been for about 2 months, and on the night Carlie stayed over, he was the only adult at the house for a while. Now, doesn't that just give you the creeps? Steve mentioned seeing Ron's truck cruising around the area they were searching, which definitely pinged on the detective's radar. They followed up with Ron, who played it cool, telling them he'd left work before Carlie even walked out the door and hadn't seen anything weird. His co-workers vouched for him, placing him at work right when he said. With that, the cops had to scratch him off the suspect list too. The day after Carlie disappeared, officers swung by her home again to talk with Susan. She was adamant Carlie had never run away before, and this whole situation was completely out of character for her daughter. The fear and worry in her voice, it just drilled home how serious this all was. Everyone felt it. Something was terribly wrong, and they needed to find Carlie fast. As the search for Carlie intensified, the authorities decided to bring in the big guns, tracking dogs. These dogs picked up Carlie's scent all right, but here's the surprising part. They followed it right to the parking lot of Evie's car wash. This wasn't even on her usual way home, but locals knew it was a popular shortcut. The plot thickens, right? The dogs were onto something, tracing her scent all the way to the back of the building. But then, just like that, her scent vanished into thin air. Now, this car wash wasn't just any old place. It had a bunch of surveillance cameras set up. And those cameras did catch something horrifying. The manager, when he reviewed the tapes, his face must have turned white as a sheet. What he saw was bone-chilling. A young girl, around 6:30 p.m., being approached and then grabbed by a mysterious man. Here's how it went down. The footage showed this guy just walking casually at first, like he was just passing by. But then, in a flash, he changed his trajectory, took a big step toward her, and grabbed her arm. You can almost feel the terror Carlie must have felt. This guy, standing right in front of her, blocking any chance of escape, dragged her away. The sheer panic and fear, that's the kind of stuff nightmares are made of. When Carlie's parents saw the tape, their worst fears were confirmed. It was their daughter on the video. But the man, he was a total stranger to them. He was just some average-height white dude with dark hair and tattoos on his forearm, wearing a jumpsuit with a name tag that was too blurry to read. And the way he moved into her path, said something to her, and then grabbed her, it was clear Charlie didn't know this man. This shocking footage quickly hit the local news stations. It was everywhere.
Remember this tape, the sinking feeling you must remember the first time you saw this tape, the now notorious security camera videotape. A young girl, a vibrant girl, being led away from a car wash by a hulking man she clearly did not know. This we all feared. Looking at those pictures could end badly, and it did.
For the officers searching for Carlie, it changed the case.
My friend Detective Hallisey had come in, and he had come from Evanos and had sat down at his desk. And I happened to be at my desk also, and we're separated by a fairly typical cubicle wall. And I heard him say, "Toby, come and look at this." And when I walked around the corner, he played the video. And I knew, and Chris knew, that was bad.
And it wasn't long before the tips started pouring in. hundreds of them. But, frustrating as it was, most of these tips led nowhere, just dead ends. It was like this guy had just vanished into the night with Carlie, leaving everyone grasping at straws. The community was on edge, glued to their screens, and waiting for any news that could lead to Carlie's safe return. As more time ticked away, the investigators were starting to fear the absolute worst. But just when things seemed bleakest, they got the break they desperately needed. Several tip-offs came in, and guess what? All fingers pointed to one man, 37-year-old Joseph Smith, an auto mechanic with a rap sheet as long as your arm, stretching all the way back to 1993. This guy wasn't just a small-time troublemaker. He was out on parole for a drug bust when Carlie disappeared. And his history? It was dark, with drug offenses and, even more chillingly, violent crimes against women, including kidnapping, aggravated battery, and false imprisonment. Among the people dropping these bombshell tips was one of Joseph's own co-workers. 2 days after Carlie vanished, this guy tells the cops that the dude in the surveillance footage, it looks a lot like Joseph, especially the way he moved and what he wore. Another colleague added to the suspicions, noting that Joseph seemed jittery and off, probably high, the day after Carlie was taken. They also mentioned Joseph had been a mess at work lately, struggling with drugs and money problems, and he hadn't even shown up for his shift the day Carlie went missing. So, the cops decide to take another look at the footage from the car wash, combing through it for any sign of Joseph or his car. His co-workers said he drove a brown Lincoln Town car, but it was supposedly busted, out of commission with transmission issues. Yet amidst all this, there was this one car that caught the investigators' eye, a pale yellow Buick station wagon. It rolled into the car wash lot about 3 minutes before Carlie was snatched. It cruised by, dipped briefly into the parking lot as if scoping the place out. This part gets really sinister. It's like the guy in the car saw Carlie walking and decided on the spur of the moment to turn into the parking lot and take her. Or maybe, just maybe, he had seen her earlier, right after she left her friend's house, and followed her to the car wash. It's chilling to think that this might not have been a random act, that he had been planning something like this, waiting for his moment. And there she was, walking alone, the perfect target for his twisted fantasies. Despite the grainy quality of the footage, making it tough to see details like the license plate or the driver's face clearly, the pieces were coming together, pointing straight at Joseph. The cops knew what they had to do next. It was time to pay Joseph Smith a visit. They needed answers, and they needed them now. So, a squad of officers pulls up to the home of Joseph's friend, Jeffrey and Naomi Pincus. Joseph was shacked up there, renting a room since his wife kicked him out, and he couldn't stay with his 3 young daughters anymore. When the cops first rolled by, they spotted Joseph outside, just chilling and smoking a cigarette. But when they knocked, silence. No answer. After what felt like ages, Joseph finally shows up at the door, all groggy, claiming he didn't hear them because he'd been napping. The detectives dived straight in, asking him where he was when Carlie disappeared. His story? He was just at home, watching the Super Bowl, chilling out. And hey, his buddies could totally vouch for him. But the cops, they weren't just taking his word for it. They pulled out a still from the car wash surveillance tape, and bam, showed it to Joseph. He squints, leans in, and yeah, he admits the guy in the pic looked a lot like him. But no way, he insists. He wasn't anywhere near that car wash.
Tips poured in from the community, leading to a mechanic with a criminal history, including drug and false imprisonment charges. It was Arresting Officer Sergeant Toby Davis who first interviewed Joseph Smith.
I felt no inkling whatsoever, to the point that as I was concluding our interview, I actually pulled a picture out, a still that I had captured from the video, and I showed it to him. And he said that looks like me, but that is not me.
The detectives weren't buying his cozy Super Bowl story and asked him to roll up his sleeves. And there they were, tattoos on his forearms, just like the guy in the video. And his hands were all scratched up, like he'd been in a scuffle. As if that wasn't sketchy enough, Joseph drops another bombshell. He had borrowed Jeffrey and Naomi's yellow station wagon that very day, but he claimed all he did was drive it down to the marina to check out the water, nothing more. The police were getting that tingling feeling, you know, the one where you just know you've caught the break you needed. But then they chat with Naomi, and she backs up Joseph's alibi. The detectives are second-guessing themselves now, wondering if they're on the wrong track. But here's where it all flips again. About an hour after the detectives had shown up, Joseph's probation officer joins the party, ready to tear through that broken-down Lincoln Town car Joseph owned. And wouldn't you know it, they hit the jackpot. Drugs, syringes, spoons, the whole 9 yards. Joseph was busted for violating his probation right then and there. Now, later that very day, Jeff rings up the police, and he's got a real clue. Turns out Naomi got her dates all mixed up. Joseph did borrow their station wagon all right, but he didn't bring it back till the next morning.
Joe came out and said, "Hey, can I use your car?" I said, "Well, just go and just, how long are you gonna be for 15 minutes? So I said, "All right, go ahead." What was you wearing at the time? His camera suit. Gray. Yellow. When I got up at 6:30, no car. 7:30, I'm ready to get walk out the door. Who shows up? Joe. Where the hell have you been? What do you look like 7:30 Monday morning? Real clean. Like, he had a good night's sleep, or he's real happy, or... But he just looked like he had a wonderful night. It was just... The way he acted, from what I know, was just very strange. And I see stuff on the mirror. You know something? I guess there was a dark side, just never saw it.
Jeffrey, being a bit of a meticulous guy, had noted the mileage before Joseph took the car. When it came back, over 300 miles had been racked up. Plus, the car was a total mess inside. Back seat all folded down and everything. And what was Joseph wearing when he left that day? A mechanic's uniform, just like the guy in the surveillance video. While Joseph was cooling his heels in custody, the investigation didn't miss a beat. The detectives kept on combing through the wooded areas near where Carlie was last seen, hoping against hope they'd find something, anything. But it was like she had disappeared into thin air. No clues, no Carlie. Then, out of the blue, one of Joseph's longtime pals walked into the police station. You could tell he was burdened, carrying heavy news. He had to talk to the investigators, and what he had to say was chilling. Not only did he confirm that the guy in the CCTV footage bore a striking resemblance to Joseph, but he also dropped a bombshell about how Joseph had been talking about his growing urge to assault women. This was no small talk. This was a serious, dark escalation. Fueled by this new info, the detectives knew they had to dive deeper. They transferred Joseph from the jail to the police headquarters for a formal sit-down, a serious interrogation that would peel back the layers of his story. And get this, the footage from that interrogation, never seen before. It was one of those intense, movie-like moments where everything hangs in the balance. The room was stark, just Joseph and the detectives, with a single purpose: to uncover the truth. One of the detectives laid it out straight as soon as they started.
We gotta sit down and we have to talk. This room is about the truth. It's the most important thing that goes on in this room, is the truth.
I was already advised to talk to a lawyer.
Who advised you?
To know you correct the part.
That means you and I can't.
We should talk to a lawyer.
The air was thick with tension. Every word weighted with the gravity of what it could mean for finding Carlie. You could almost hear the clock ticking in the background, each second passing, ramping up the suspense. What would Joseph say? What truths would come to light in this stark room where the most important thing was to peel back the layers of lies? The atmosphere was charged, every breath, every movement loaded with potential revelations. The tension was sky high in that interrogation room.
I can't talk to you. You have requested a lawyer.
What about my family? Why can't I call them? You know, I want to, I want to talk to my parents or my brother.
Can I contact the public defender's office for you? And they can bring a lawyer down here.
Hey,
Did you say something?
do you think that I could smoke or not?
But it is a federal building. It's against the law for you to smoke in here.
I mean, like outside or something.
Not right now.
Can I call my mom?
Not right now.
So, what's, you got it covered?
Yeah, we're working on it right now.
I need to talk to, my family, see what's going on.
But Joseph, man, he couldn't even get started. He kept asking to talk to his family again and again. It seemed clear he was desperate to get some advice, or maybe prep them for the bombshell he was about to drop. But the detectives had to move him back to the jail before anything substantial could come out of him. It was there, in the confines of his cell, that Joseph finally made that critical call to his brother John. And what he revealed on that call confirmed everyone's worst nightmares. On February 5th, 5 days after Carlie vanished, John made a call to the authorities. He asked them to come over to his place, and when they arrived, he dropped the kind of news that sends shivers down your spine. He knew where they could find Carlie's body. He directed them to a secluded, wooded area behind a church, just a few miles from where Carlie lived. John relayed that to his brother Joseph, had confessed to him about abducting and brutally assaulting the young girl. Later that day, it came out that Joseph had also called his mother from jail, and what he told her twisted the knife even deeper. He confessed to murdering Carlie.
Smith, his brother John, and their mother met in private 2 days later. It's there that John Smith told authorities his brother confessed to raping and killing Carlie.
The toughest part for me was coming home during the investigation and my children asking if I had found the little girl. And for 4 of those nights, I had to tell them that I hadn't found that little girl. And then I remember coming home, and we had Carlie, we had found her body, and I told them that we had found the little girl. And I remember my oldest son asking if she was all right, and I had to tell them that she wasn't, but that we had caught the bad guy.
This wasn't just a case of a missing girl anymore. It was a stark, brutal reality of a young life stolen and a family left reeling from a betrayal they never saw coming. When John spilled the beans about where to find Carlie, the police didn't waste a second. They dashed to the church and started scouring the nearby woods. Heartbreakingly, it didn't take them long to find Carlie's body, partially hidden under the brush. It was a grim scene, and the evidence suggested she'd been dragged there. Abrasions on her right side told a tale of violence and struggle.
On February 5th, the sheriff announced Carlie's body had been found in the brush of a local church.
The body of a beautiful 11-year-old girl, Carlie Rusha, has been found. Joseph Smith is under arrest for the abduction and murder of Carlie.
An autopsy confirmed everyone's worst fears. The cause of death? Ligature strangulation. It gets worse. She had been brutally assaulted too. Marks on her wrists showed she had been tied up at some point. A horrifying detail that painted a picture of her last moments. So on October 24th, 2005, Joseph Smith was found guilty of first-degree murder, along with separate charges of battery on a child under 12 and kidnapping.
You could feel the tension in the courtroom. The judge warned everyone, scream or shout, and you're tossed out. And then came the verdict, broadcast across the country.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count one of the charges. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged.
Carlie Bruscia's mother broke down crying and said, "Thank you, Jesus." Carlie's father simply nodded in approval. Joseph Smith, guilty on all counts. Bailiffs began preparing to take Smith away when the judge had to slow them down.
I need to just slow down for 1 second.
Smith will be back in court a week from Monday when the same jury returns to recommend a life or death sentence.
I will now be preparing to present further evidence on November the 28th and will be arguing that a sentence of life in prison without possibility of parole is the best decision in this case.
He was sentenced to death by lethal injection for Carlie's murder and received life without parole for the other crimes. But here's where the legal twists kick in. On July 18, 2017, a judge vacated Joseph's death sentence. Why? A new bill had passed requiring a unanimous jury vote for the death penalty. Joseph's jury had been split 10-2 in favor of death.
Family and friends of a Sarasota girl raped and murdered more than 15 years ago will have to wait another month to learn if her killer will be put to death. Prosecutors are trying to get Joseph Smith back on death row after his conviction in 2004 in that rape, abduction, and murder of 11-year-old Carlie Bruscia. 8 on your side's Victoria Price joining us from the Tampa News Center. She sorts out what happened in court today. Victoria.
Hi, Keith. The issue here goes back to the fact that the jury was not unanimous when Smith received that death penalty. A Supreme Court decision threw that sentence out, but now a new decision means it could be back on the table.
But that death sentence was overturned in 2017. And then last month, the Florida Supreme Court reversed its own decision, leaving this case and dozens across the state in limbo.
The Constitution does not require a unanimous jury recommendation.
Tuesday, the judge delayed making a decision, waiting to see what precedent the state Supreme Court sets in another death penalty case.
I think I'm required by law to await the mandate from the Supreme Court in the Poole decision.
It makes me very angry. Why should he live longer than she did?
Those who loved Carlie, like Sherry Langworthy, feel that every delay is a disservice to her memory.
In a dramatic courtroom moment, Judge Roberts ordered a new penalty phase trial. This didn't change the guilty verdict, just the sentencing. Citing a case where the U.S. Supreme Court reversed a Florida capital sentencing law as unconstitutional, Judge Roberts ruled that Joseph, now 51, deserved a new sentencing hearing under the updated statute. However, in a twist of fate, Joseph never saw that new hearing. He died in prison in 2021, awaiting his chance to face the jury again.
We have a news alert out of the state attorney's office for the 12th Judicial Circuit. The man convicted of kidnapping, sexual assaulting, and murdering Carlie Bruscia back in 2004 has died in prison. The Attorney General notified State Attorney Ed Brodsky that Joseph Smith died. His office says the cause of death is unknown. Bruscia was 11 years old when she was taken from a car wash in Sarasota.
I believe at that time is when I feel like that's when Carlie will be free. Then I can be free also. When I watch him die, then that'll be like the end of the book. And then I know she'll be at peace, and then I can kind of start feeling at peace with myself also.
His death closed the final chapter on a case that had haunted the community and challenged the legal system, leaving a legacy of sorrow, anger, and unanswered questions about justice and safety.